what is more challenging, internal selling or selling to a customer outside?
To me, it's the same. I think internal selling, it's easier once you establish credibility. And to me, it starts with the needs assessment versus being told, okay, we need training. I think of where one time I was working with a sales leader, they said, we need training on closing the sale. And I think somebody might go, okay, let me go do that. But, when you say, well, let me ask you a question. Why is that the case? Well, because we're not closing enough sales. Well, why aren't you closing enough sales? Well, because we're getting beaten by our competitors. Well, why are you getting beaten by the competitors? Well, because they're less expensive. Why is that a challenge? Well, because we're not seen as being worth the amount of money we charge. Oh, so doesn't that mean you need training on value propositions and overcoming a price objection and competitive differentiators? Oh, yeah, I guess we do. All right, well, let's go do that. And let's measure and see where everybody is currently with a pre-assessment and measure after we've done the training and see if we can get an uptick in knowledge acquisition. And it's, I think, starting conversations that get into, are we really doing the right thing? And is training part of the solution? Is there a leadership issue? Are people being inadvertently rewarded for bad behavior? Are they being inadvertently punished for good behaviors? Then we got to look at processes. And I think once you span the umbrella of what we can do and have oversight and give credence into, and you have senior sales leaders go, I never thought of that. That's a good point. You start to build credibility. And then when you show ROI, like because of the training and because of the enablement, we've seen sales go up this much and here's how we can prove it. Then the internal selling gets much, much easier because you have that, I call it street cred, in the space. Whereas with an external customer, right, it's usually a new conversation, a new introduction every time, and you're always having to prove yourself.
You also seem to imply that you need to have some political savvy, especially when it comes to selling to the C-level.
Yes, right. Yeah, you've got to be able to make the inroads to get in, to have the conversations, and then be able to have a conversation that shows a level of credibility and prove that you know what you're talking about, that you have the competence.
So what is your relationship at this point with the CEO of Epicor?
Well, we've got, currently we're set up to where we're like matrix managed between our VP of sales and the head of learning and development, working with those two groups, and then working closely with the senior vice president of product who focuses on sales enablement tools. And so the way we're set up, I mean, I know the CEO to say hello to him, but I don't sit in on executive leadership team meetings, and I don't think that I necessarily should, but it is important to sit in maybe that next level down with our SVPs of sales and marketing and that sort of thing. And so working on that currently, to be transparent, we've just set up a sales enablement steering committee. And so with the head of, with all those heads of people we're supposed to influence without authority, and my first goal talking to my boss is, hey, before they have that first meeting, let's sit down and say, this is what sales enablement is, because most, I think in our company, the culture and the previous history has been that sales enablement's just the training, like just doing sales training. And it's so much more than that. And I've done things with the groups I'm working with and have results to show what it is, and that we're getting upticks in production as a result. And now it's about scaling that out and saying we need to be involved in forecasting and territory planning and compensation and driving senior level coaching. Because that's one thing, I don't know if you guys will agree, that I'm starting to see is you can teach sales managers how to coach and teach them how to reinforce the behavior from training and company initiatives. But if their managers, right, sales directors, sales vice presidents, aren't coaching those coaches in the same way for a true cultural adoption, then you don't usually have the accountability, right? People what you inspect, not what you expect. And that's usually where it falls short, and managers fall back to deal coaching, right? Pipeline coaching versus skills coaching, and how to improve competencies that lead to sales.
So Paul, allow me to reflect on that, because when I sort of analyze the track of our conversation so far, you seem to be saying that as a sales enablement manager, you're rewarded for analyzing performance problems and diagnosing people, process, and technology issues. But yet I don't hear enough of a connection with the strategic level of your company, where I think you want to get a seat at the table in those C-level meetings. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, that's the plan, and that's the thing where it's coming into an organization and trying to redefine and share information that where you get people's attention, and I think we're there. But starting at a place where that was not the case, it's been a progression of taking initiatives, driving behavior change, and showing the results of that, and saying, hey, if we could scale that out,
Right.
this is where we need insight. This is where we need to be part of these conversations. This is where we need to be involved where traditionally this function has not been involved before. And, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. There's a lot going on and it takes some time, right? And it's a big organization, but I think we're getting there for sure.
Thank you. Chris, describe the situation in your company. Do you have to legitimize the role of sales enablement?
Certainly, at some level, you always want to provide some sort of return on investment for the services you provide. I think if we talk about technology, I don't engage a vendor that can't clearly articulate how they calculate ROI on their platform. If they can't tell me how they're going to take my data and show me how they've made an improvement, the conversation isn't going to last very long. I think when it comes to a lot of the training and assessments, just how Paul basically described is, I just simply call it root cause analysis, right? What is really the problem that we're getting at here? And as I've found, and I think, Paul, you can echo this, is once you get to that real challenge, not just the surface level challenge they think they're having, your training and whatever you produce there is far more impactful to your sellers and to the sales leadership itself. And a lot of that stuff, it's very difficult to calculate the ROI. And so, a lot of the times we will rely on anecdotal feedback to say, now I understand my role. Now I understand how to position the product. Or, you'll see anecdotal increases in pipeline health, velocity, close rates, things like that.
So let me measure artificially and haphazardly your perception of how much power percentage you have over three constituents. A, what kind of material do you create for training? B, what is your power and influence over budgets in the company, and what's your power and influence over the C-level group in your company?
Okay. So in my scenario, I represent a business unit, but I also produce work or programs for the enterprise as a whole. And then in that scenario, I'm responsible for training materials, training programs, and executing training. When it comes to technology or piloting programs, we'll put it together. We'll work with a vendor. Generally, vendors like to come on site, put it together, and really write it in your language, per se. And so I'm directly correlated with that. I have a dedicated sales trainer on my team as well who will, take that ball and run with it and produces superior content. When it comes to sort of my influence on the budget, I always have to make the case, but if the case is solid, we'll find the money. If I can show that there's more of an impact to an enterprise or to an organization than just directly sales. For example, I purchased a simple ticketing system to streamline sales support, membership, and some other departments like billing. The impact that I could show and say, listen, we can streamline, we can speed up by X% here, here, and here. We can facilitate here, here, and here. And we can, the product has these features which will help us do X, Y, and Z. It makes the case a lot easier. And I will have to go through a dog and pony show, and I'm completely used to it. But usually the money is easily sourced if if your cause is just, I should say. And then to your third question, how much impact do I have to the C-level? Aside from bumping into him in the elevator whenever I'm in corporate, not much. I think, he may get a 25-second brief quarterly on the work that I do or the work myself and others do. And it may sway their opinions or things like that. But at this point, we don't have that C-level influence. A level below, a little bit more informed. A level below that, much more informed, much more involved in everything that we produce day to day.
Thank you. Jane Marie, I want to hear your perspective on what we just discussed.
Sure. Well, just listening, I mean, I think if we believe that having access to the C-level is important, then there's some work to do. And I'm wondering what that work is and how. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can figure it out right here, right now. Not sure, but I think it's worth a conversation. At least that's what I'm hearing. And again, I think it's hard depending on the size of the company. So, for example, I have a client currently, very large company. They are able to control their own budget, but they don't own the business unit. So they still have to go through a business unit process in order to get that budget, but they're a Fortune 100 company. So it's huge. Like what, and again, they're going to run into that CEO in the elevator. That's about it because the company is so big. But in a small company where there aren't as many departments, I think there's a lot of opportunity for rubbing the C-level elbows and for having a much bigger impact. And I think that's an interesting dynamic that we have that I've seen in society in terms of our members, that we've got people who are working in really big companies that have a much smaller scope, but really do need to elevate in order to get progress made in their goals. And then we have folks that are one man, one person, one woman show who do everything. And they are working directly with the CEO and the CFO to get things done. And both jobs are really hard for very different reasons. So those are my observations and analysis since you asked.
Thank you. Paul, what is your response to Jen?
Well, I think she's right. I mean, one thing that was occurring to me is because in the past, or I even say in general, right, usually the people that are in those senior level meetings are those that are in charge of the silos. So you've got, a CIO who's got this huge org chart under him, a CMO's got that huge org chart of that function, and you've got people that are very tenured, multiple decades, huge responsibilities, big budgets that they control. And so saying, hey, I'm in sales enablement, I should be in on those meetings. It's like, well, why? I mean, what would you? So not understanding the function. And I think the other piece is I was challenged by somebody where I was talking about needing to be in those senior meetings. And he said, hey, I think, you're trying to play above your pay grade. And you're going to go in those meetings and tell those people that have all that responsibility, you know more than they do? I said, about sales enablement? I said, absolutely. And I said, I would hope you feel the same way. I said, it's not about saying that, just like with the CMO talks in that meeting, she's saying she knows more about marketing than the CFO. And that's why they're all getting together so they can each share their information and respective updates so they can make sure they're all in sync. There's not a C-level head of sales enablement. And so if there was, then that person would be in there. But that's not where this function has evolved. And so it's about giving insight and guidance to say, this is what we know, this is what we're aware of. Best-in-class companies, right? Because we've got this great data from companies like CSO Insights to say, hey, I'm just the messenger. I'm not self-important. I'm not here to be the smartest guy in the room. This is what best-in-class companies do around sales enablement. I want to lead that. That's why you're paying me. And so if you can support with budget and what your individual groups do to align with the efforts needed to achieve, we can have similar upticks in, for example, one of the stats is that companies with well-defined, robust, funded sales enablement functions have a 10% increase, do 10% better than companies that don't. And so being able to share this stuff and say, we're not just being subjective. We're not saying, hey, this might work. We're saying, this is what's proven to work. I'm here to be the ambassador of that with our organization. And to do that, here's where I would need your help and support. But these are the results we can achieve. Who's with me? I think it's that simple, but you've got to be in front of the people to have that conversation.
Well,
yeah, and that's why I think that partnering, the partnering, right? We talked earlier, it's the conversations, it's the finding the partners. You can enlist people in your organization to get on your bandwagon because you're solving problems for them. And I think that's what's so important and possible here, that we could buy technology, we could deliver amazing training, but ultimately we have the ability to influence people by building those relationships and those partnerships and getting them in our camp so that we can get those conversations with the C-suite and make that happen.
Paul, I want to reflect on this a little bit more. I like the way you assert yourself in a situation where people confront you and challenge you. Do you want to have a seat at the table? This is above your pay grade, which sounds to me like somebody is trying to wrestle you for control, whereas the focus needs to be, as you asserted, one of mutual learning. What can we learn from each other? And I think that in a way, Paul, you want to play the card of the chief learning officer of the organization, because if you learn more about and teach more about how to solve business problems, then you can handle more difficult situations at work, and you will get more wins, and the company will make more money. So I think that is a role that you probably want to accentuate and get stronger at, and have more conversations with C-level people, so you can earn that strategic seat at the table.
Oh, and I've done it with different companies, and I'm doing it, here. I think one of the things I will say through the culture of our company that's different than some is that at Epicor, I can go to anybody in the company up the food chain without fear of, oh, I'm going over somebody's head, or, oh, I didn't check with this person before I went to that person. So I will say, where there are politics in every organization, that is one piece that I've really found refreshing, to make those inroads and pick up the phone and just call or ask questions and say, well, how do you do that? How will we make sure that that gets done? And what will your level of support be in that? And be able to create accountabilities in a diplomatic fashion and ask for that kind of support without feeling like, again, well, gotta make check with my boss before I call this person, or is that C-level person going to say, why is this guy calling me? We don't have that, and I find that very refreshing, and I really want to give Epicor credit for that kind of environment.
It sounds great. Christopher, what's it like in your company in comparison?
So you can certainly, we are a matrix organization, and you can certainly sort of reach across the aisle whenever needed. I think that courtesy needs to go out first. Hey, I want to talk to so-and-so about XYZ problem. I think Paul had a lot of really good points, and Gerhard, you brought up the point of, there's some politicking. I think, as Paul said, it's street cred. I just say you have to establish trust. And when you establish the trust of these people, it's you're solving their problems too. People are more likely to listen to what you have to say. They're more likely to tell their supervisor and their supervisor or their sphere of influence of, listen, you need to listen to so-and-so and what they have to say, because they've solved XYZ problem for us, or they're thinking larger than just their role. And I think that goes back to, so that at descriptor we get all the time of the VP of broken things, right? No one's going to fix this problem. What do we do? Well, you just give it to the sales enablement guy. He'll probably figure it out. And Jen's laughing because she knows that's true. It resonates with, I think it resonates with everybody in the society, certainly, is just, the way to build that street cred, the way to navigate the politics, and the way to sort of think more holistically is just find a problem and solve it, and then go find the other problem and go solve it. And I think in my organization, that alone allows you to navigate the hierarchy or the matrix, however you want to refer to it, most effectively.
To wrap it up, Paul, can you enlighten us what we can learn from your Denver chapter? What's the Denver chapter known for most?
Well, we've been spending a lot of time on how to influence without authority as individual contributors, and metrics, what to measure to prove. We used to call it proof of life at a company I was with, to show that we are impacting specific metrics that we're in charge of. We just had a meeting on that last week, and I'm excited. I've got one of our chapter members who's going to be presenting that, or posting up a template to be able to present that at national. And I'll be talking about something at our national convention as well, around focusing not just on knowledge acquisition, but skills application, and then thereafter behavior adoption with a frequency and a cadence to drive a cultural embracement of the kind of things that we want to drive with our people. So I guess it'd be those couple of things.
Well, I look forward to hearing your presentation in Dallas. Chris, what can we learn from your chapter?
South Florida is most known for the Definition Project, which certainly I believe is turning lots of heads. So I'm very, very proud of this project. We've put a lot of work in, especially President Michael Abadi. We've gone through grading rubrics. We've gone through several different definitions. I think when it comes time for us to convene in Dallas, we'll probably go through a very short exercise, but come up with something that, not everyone will love, but I think will accurately represent who we are as a professional organization and as a trade. And so I'm really confident with a lot of the work. Certainly it was a tall order, and I think it's being handled expertly.
Jean Marie, reflect on DC.
I think what's cool about the DC chapter recently is how many people are stepping up into volunteer roles and taking on so much work for this conference. And I'm just really proud to be working side by side with those people every day.
Well, I want to thank everybody. That was very, very educational. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, please hit the like button. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.